So this morning I have two scriptures. I've usually been going with just the gospel recently. So we're going to read the first scripture and chat a little bit about it, and then we'll read the second scripture and chat a little bit more about that, okay? So this is from the book of Isaiah. And listen closely to some of the pronouns that are used here and some of the things that are placed in opposite of one another, okay? So here it is. Let me sing for my beloved, my love song concerning his vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. He dug it and cleared it of stones and planted it with choice vines. He built a watchtower in the midst of it and hewed out a wine vat in it. He expected it to yield grapes, but it yielded wild grapes. And now, inhabitants of Jerusalem, people of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more was there to do for my vineyard that I have not done in it? When I expected it to yield grapes, why did it yield wild grapes? And now I will tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will remove its hedge, and it shall be devoured. I will break down its wall, and it shall be trampled down. I will make it a waste. It shall not be pruned or hoed, and it shall be overgrown with briars and thorns. I will also command the clouds that they rain no rain upon it. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the people of Judah are his pleasant planting. He expected justice, but saw bloodshed. He saw and expected righteousness, but he heard a cry. Okay. That last line is pretty stout there. Okay, so did you remember? I just said it. So the God, or he, whoever he is, expected something good. Do you remember what the word was? Justice. But saw bloodshed. And expected to see and hear righteousness, but heard a cry. All right, that's like the encapsulation of the whole feeling of the scripture here. Is that who might we guess is the vineyard keeper? Who is that, supposedly? Who do you think? The Creator, exactly. Okay, it's a pretty simple understanding. So God planted this wonderful creation. Okay? And God was expecting what out of this beautiful vineyard? Expecting wine grapes. Right, grapes, and especially ones that would produce wine. Exactly. Exactly. Not grape jelly, but wine. Exactly. But what came of this wonderful vineyard? Wild grapes. Yeah. Okay. And then later in the scripture it says, I'm going to take away the hedge, I'm going to take away the wall, I'm going to ask, I'm going to say rain don't fall on here. So what's going to happen to the vineyard? Be destroyed. It's going to be overrun with thorns and everything, right? Okay. In the last line, we would talk. By the way, we have a Bible study. You're welcome to join it on what day? Wednesdays at 4:30. I'd love to have you here. We were talking about this very thing. And I was reading this commentary about that very last set of lines. It's mind-blowing in many ways. It would have been mind-blowing for the people of Jerusalem or Judah at the time when they heard it. And here's what it was, because it's all in a word play. Those last lines about expecting justice but instead saw bloodshed, and wanting righteousness but heard a cry. In the Hebrew words here, all right, so we had the words, the first things against each other, justice and bloodshed, okay? Now, in the word for justice was mishpat. All right. Now listen to the word, though, for bloodshed. The word bloodshed was mishpat. So mishpat to mispak. You hear how similar those two words were? Mishpat, mispak. So to the ear of the Hebrew people, when they heard this scripture, they would have realized the fine line between justice and bloodshed. They would have gone, oh my gosh, those sound so alike, right? And then for the words righteousness and cry, the writer did the exact same thing. So righteousness, let's see, the word for righteousness is tzedakah. Tzedakah, righteousness. But the word for cry was tze'akah. Tzedakah, tze'akah. You see how it was in there that would have been like, that would have been like a jolt for them to hear these. It was like a song. It was like a rhythm and a rhyme, you know. You were into this, and then, I got this, but I got that. And those two words, of course, the meanings were so different. But they're sounding so close, so amazing. All right? So that fine line that I just described, which, I don't know if that perfect, that kind of interpretation is specifically what the writer even wanted, but that's how I'm describing it. So what's the fine line between justice and bloodshed? Is there such? What do you think? I'm going to let you sit on that one for a second and keep my mouth shut. What's the fine line between justice and bloodshed? Hope? Interesting. Interesting. Any other thoughts? Yes, Jeff? Self-respect. Self-restraint between justice and bloodshed. Do you see in the world something that could go between justice or bloodshed that's happening right now? Can you find that anywhere? What's that? Hong Kong. Ooh, wow, that came out right away. What's that? Portland, Oregon. Explain that to everybody.
Right and left groups fighting each other.
Mm-hmm. Melissa?
The white supremacists were having gathering, and the people on the left were protesting and got violent.
Right. So, protests and violence. Reaction. So you see, but what's always most important is two things: is ownership, though, of justice or bloodshed. Because somebody owns both of those things somewhere. And the problem is that we too often think that the other person is the owner of the bloodshed part, and we are the owner of the justice, right? That's how it rolls in humanity, okay? But there's a problem here because it all depends on where your shekels are stored. Really, if my money's on this side of the argument, this is where the justice is. But if my money's on this side of the argument, this is where the justice is. So we find this place. So who's the arbiter of all of this? Of course, we know it's going to have to be God. But, yes?
So they're saying that bloodshed is sometimes the result of justice.
Bloodshed is sometimes the result of justice. We want to talk a little bit more about that. Go ahead. Lay it on us. Okay, so just in a very simple thing, whether you agree with the death penalty or not, justice can lead to bloodshed. Okay? So that's a very troubling thing. Okay? So we're talking about justice in the church. You know, I don't want to, you know, when we talk about justice in church, we're not talking about the law. All right? Because the law, especially legal law that we live by, practice, enforce, is not of God, but is of humanity. This idea of justice in the Bible, this idea of justice in faith matters is about, sometimes I think, it's sort of like this, what is the elusive desire of God? I think that's how sometimes I have to put it in there. Because honestly, I can be up in the pulpit, all right? I mean, let's face it. Years ago, I've been here now 15 years. Years ago, I was very upset about going into Iraq. And I preached against it. Well, I got myself a couple letters about that. Don't bring the politics into the pulpit. Problem is that I thought that politics had co-opted my theology, my understanding of that war and is there such a thing as a just war, you know? So you see, you find yourself in humanity in this constant battle between the two. And you can find churches against each other on this issue. You can find people in the same pew against one another in this thing, okay? But this idea, justice is really not ours. Justice is God's. And it's sometimes very elusive because we can think that we know exactly what it is. The problem is, most often, it has to do with our human desires or needs, not necessarily what God feels is right for the world. So these words that were put in here put a fine line in between these things, and we have to be careful about that. Now I want you to listen to the book of Luke, and he's going to start out with something smacking you right in the face, okay? I'm going to tell you right now, Jesus' words are going to smack you right across the face. So listen carefully. Here's what Jesus said to them. I came to bring fire to the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. I have a baptism with which to be baptized, and what stress I am under until that baptism is completed. Do you think I have come to bring peace to the earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. From now on, 5 in one household will be divided, 3 against 2, 2 against 3. They will be divided, father against son, son against father, mother against daughter, and daughter against mother, mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And he also said to the crowds, when you see a cloud rising in the west, you immediately say, hey, it's going to rain. And so it happens. And when you see the south wind blowing, you say, there will be a scorching heat. And it happens. You hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of earth and sky, but why do you not know how to interpret the present time? A dividing line has been placed there by Jesus. What do you think this dividing line is? New awakening, what was that? Belief? Anything else? You may not want to say it. I don't care. Say it. Yes, sir. Jeff.
He's talking about the second coming.
He's talking about a second coming. So, Jesus, in the second line, said this thing. I have a baptism with which to be baptized, and what stress I am under until it is completed. So baptism, we need to realize, is that Jesus was baptized, and what did Jesus' baptism lead to eventually? his crucifixion on the cross, his death, his resurrection, is yet to come again, as we don't really understand. So we have this thing that you and I, have you been baptized? Yes. Far many of you, some of you haven't. You know what your baptism is leading to? Our death. What is our hope in that death? Our resurrection. So, it's not that I think that Jesus is saying to us, some of us are baptized and believe, and some of us are not baptized and we don't believe. And this is going to be the division in the world. I don't think that's what it is at all. I want to think that Jesus had heard this interesting Isaiah passage long ago, because he was a Jew, he would have known it by heart. I want to believe that Jesus was talking about justice, God's justice. On Facebook yesterday, I reposted something that somebody had shared. It was a picture of a church building with a smile on the face. And a bunch of people back behind it, and the church building was heading off in this direction. It says, "Come follow me." Problem was, all the people were following the church, and over here on this side there was Jesus standing all alone with a terrible, downtrodden face. Okay? And I commented about it, and I put it on our Facebook page. I talked about it. I said, it's a very difficult topic because, lots of times churches, we all want, let's just all believe the same thing. Give me the right thing to believe, and I will follow you to the end. Problem is, sometimes that's the leadership of one person. It could be the clergy person. It could be just a strong voice in the church. And everyone follows lockstep behind because it's such a compelling thing. It seems like it's the justice, when in fact, is it God's justice? Is it the thing that God wanted? This is an incredibly difficult thing. You see the dividing, or the line, the fine line between justice and bloodshed, between righteousness and the cry. Sometimes it can be just the charismatic presence of someone who's willing just to speak up louder than all the rest. Well, when I wrote the prayer for today, I wanted to remind myself that I love God more than anyone else. Sorry, Suzanne. She'd say the same thing, though. God has to be my closest companion because there are so many issues in the world. There's Portland and there's Hong Kong. There's stuff in our church. There's stuff in our town, in our state, and in our nation that go, we have this side and we have this side. And whether I'm strong on one side or the other, it's like, what's justice? Who must I must realize I have to be closest to, and that is my God. May I not shy away from the possibility that I have been led away astray myself. From your concern, God, from your focus, God, from your justice, God. Restore my focus to be that of mishpat, not mispah, of justice, not of bloodshed. This can only be dealt with between you and your Creator. And I pray with all my heart and my soul that you do so. And don't be afraid to see that maybe something isn't quite right. This is for you. This is our God. May you follow God. May the Lord be with you.